All right, let's try this one more time. Let's get into some video game news. Starfield discourse is still at an all-time peak, though the hype is coming down since the game released for the people who bought the $100 version of the game over the weekend. A lot of people have been playing it. The reviews are in. The game has scored 88 on Metacritic with, I believe, 50 critic reviews or so. The most recent Starfield drama, though, is a little bit layered, a little bit complicated. The first thing I've got lined up for y'all is this story by PC Gamer, which reads, a $5 Starfield mod to enable DLSS frame generation has been cracked to remove the modder's DRM. Like I said, there's a lot of layers. This article is written by Jacob Ridley. So essentially, Starfield was not going to support NVIDIA's DLSS, which is a proprietary frame sampling software, which just lets your games run at a lower resolution, but blows them up and makes them look super nice and allows you to run things at a really, really nice frame rate, depending on the game. Let's get into the story. This modder made a mod to allow DLSS support. Obviously, a lot of NVIDIA GPU users out there, so that's going to be a desirable mod. Modder Pure Dark made the DLSS 2.0 version free, but charged $5 for the FrameGen compatible version via a Patreon subscription. Now, surprisingly, this modder put DRM into their own mod. I'm not sure we've seen a lot of this before, but people were pretty upset about this. The PC Gamer story goes on to read, a Starfield mod that replaces the game's native FSR 2.2 support with DLSS 3.5 and enables frame generation has had its DRM cracked. The premium mod had been previously locked behind a Patreon paywall to support the mod's developer Pure Dark, but has swiftly been removed by a popular cracking website. So another modder cracked the mod. Now there are actually a lot of mods, it seems like, that do this. So it's kind of confusing why Bethesda themselves wouldn't support DLSS out of the gate. I'm sure, I would assume that support is coming eventually, since it's easy enough to do that. All these modders are out there doing it. But what's interesting is this Pure Dark modder actually has a very successful Patreon, and I think this is why probably a lot of people got upset about the DRM and maybe about the mod in general. This story on Video Gamer by Amar Chowdhury says, Starfield's DLSS modder is allegedly earning over $40,000 per month. Now, that doesn't include, I don't think, Patreon's cut. They usually take between 5 and 12%. From what I understand, it's not the usual 30-70. It's a little bit different on Patreon depending on what you're charging for, and I know that they do take a percentage of sales if you're selling things on there. If you go over to Pure Dark's Patreon, you can see the way they came up with that number. He has 9,000 subscribers. He's making DLSS 3 and DLSS 2, FSR 2, and XESS mods. So it's something that I think a lot of people would be interested in. The lowest tier is $5, so they just did the math. 9,000 times $5, you end up with like $45,000, somewhere around there. And then maybe they did do some of the deductions based on like an average percent of what Patreon would take. So that's frustrating. This guy's charging for mods for people and then also adding DRM, which, gamers already hate. Multiple layers of this kind of drama. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this story. I'm imagining that official DLSS support comes eventually, and then this is not going to be an issue anymore. But yeah, people are in an uproar about this. They're upset with this modder who's making a pretty penny and then added DRM. So I just thought it was interesting. Wanted to share that one with you. Let's move on though to another Bethesda story. I thought this one was humorous. Here's another jam by PC Gamer. The headline reads, Bethesda says most of Starfield's 1,000 plus planets are dull on purpose because when the astronauts went to the moon, there was nothing there, but they certainly weren't bored. That's a pull quote. We'll get into it. This story is by Joshua Wollens, and essentially what has happened is Ashley Chang, Bethesda's managing director, and Todd Howard, creative director, did an interview with the New York Times. That interview is paywalled, so I couldn't get you the exact pull quote, but PC Gamer did a really nice job of kind of summarizing what happened here. What Chang said was, the point of the vastness of space is you should feel small. It should feel overwhelming. Basically, there's a criticism that there's going to be hundreds of planets or thousands of planets that players can explore, but maybe that it'll be boring because there's so many. And Chang pointed out that not every planet is supposed to be Disney World, basically. She said when the astronauts went to the moon, there was nothing there. They certainly weren't bored. Now, it's an interesting pull quote because some video games are meant to emulate realism, and the best video games, I think, find a way to kind of implement realism but make it fun for players to play. So this is kind of an interesting deflection of like, hey, yeah, like some of our planets are just gonna be boring, guys. Sorry about that. Todd Howard followed up by saying, all of us, I think, at some point look to the sky and say, man, I wonder what it would be like to blast off and land on the moon. He continued, we need the scale of Starfield to have that feeling. We could have made a game where there are 4 cities and 4 planets, but that would not have the same feeling of being this explorer. So again, kind of just doubling down on that. You know, some of the planets are gonna be boring because you're exploring, and if you find something interesting every time, then for some reason, that wouldn't give you the sense of realism or immersion that players are looking for when they play Bethesda games. I'm not sure if I buy it. I thought it was an interesting deflection about like, well, you have all these planets, so there's nothing to do. It's like games like No Man's Sky faced this exact same problem and they had to grapple with it. And it took them, you know, a year and a half, 2 years to kind of actually like dial it in and find the balance for that stuff. Maybe in some ways people might argue that it's still kind of not perfectly balanced, but yeah, I think that this is interesting deflection considering the size of the problem that they have to solve here in terms of making sure that players are having fun exploring but aren't completely bored with procedurally generated landscapes and planets and things like that. Of course, this marketing spin, right? It's a deflection about one of the worries and criticisms about the game as it's reaching its like official day 1 launch that isn't part of the pre-order $100 version of the game. So interesting story. Let's move on though. This next story is pretty funny. This story is a headline from IGN. It says, Internet has fun after PlayStation offers Spider-Man fans 19 inches of Venom. There was a social media post from PlayStation UK. They wrote, treat yourself to 19 inches of Venom and more with the Marvel Spider-Man 2 Collector's Edition. Of course, they're referring to the statue, but 19 inches of Venom obviously is an innuendo for, you know, you can guess. And a lot of people kind of went ham on this, posting a lot of reaction GIFs and memes and things like that. IGN summarized it. This story was posted by Ryan Dinsdale. Let's just go through some of the highlights here. Someone wrote, weird choice of words, PlayStation. Another said, you mean the figurine, right? And another person said, someone in marketing today is getting a fat bonus check with the most nastiest side eye the department has ever seen. And there's a lot more replies. And you got the Anakin meme, you mean the figurine, right? This stuff's great. A lot of the hot pepper reaction GIFs. So that's pretty funny. We can find a few. I have so many comments. Firstly, 19 inches being way too big. People in here just memeing it up. That's pretty much the story. I thought it was cute. Kind of funny if you missed it. You know, good old Gray here, taking the shirt off. Kratos holding a cucumber. Oh, okay, let's move on. This next story is near and dear, I think, to a lot of people's hearts. Nintendo won't reveal new Mario actor until Super Mario Bros. Wonder credits. This story is from The Gamer, this headline is, and the byline is by James Thornton. Charles Martinet is retiring. I'm not sure how much of his voice is being used because, you know, there's obviously lots and lots of recordings they have of Charles Martinet. I'm not sure how much of that is being used for the new Mario game, but according to this story, he's retired, so somebody else new is stepping in. Also, somebody new is coming in for Luigi. Nintendo isn't saying who that person is, and with the backlash of the Chris Pratt stuff in the movie, I can understand why. This article goes on to allege that, you know, whoever beats the game first will find out, but let's be real, someone's going to data mine this game as soon as it comes out, and they're going to figure out the credits some other way without having to beat it. We'll probably know before the game's even officially out, I'm guessing. But interesting story. Who's going to take the crown from the legendary Charles Martinet? Really big shoes to fill. I'm really interested to see who it happens to be. All right, next story. This one's a little more sad. 30 years after Descent, developer Volition is suddenly no more. This is from Ars Technica. Kyle Orland is the writer of the article. And essentially this article goes in to explain about Volition and what's going on with the Embracer Group, who bought THQ, right, and spun up THQ Nordic. Volition seemed like they jumped through a few different hoops to continue making Saints Row games, and their most recent one was not a success. That game recently just went on sale on Steam. It was like, I think like 30 or 40% off or something like that. It was like down to 20 bucks or less. And it just like, that was for the launch of the PC release. So maybe some people could have seen this coming, but Embracer Group is basically shutting down Volition. Let's read the first paragraph so you can just get the context. Volition, the development studio behind franchises from Descent and Free Space to Red Faction and Saints Row, has been abruptly shut down after a 30-year run. Parent company Embracer Group said the studio will be closed effective immediately as part of a massive restructuring program that began in June, according to a farewell notice posted on Volition's website and on LinkedIn. That is so harsh. Very unfortunate. I like Volition as a developer. And I mean, an indie developer doesn't really deserve to be shuttered entirely. I feel like, especially Volition, who seemed like they were really trying to put their best foot forward. I know there was a lot of backlash about that first Saints Row game. I had read stories about that game actually getting a lot better as development went on and there were patches and things, but it did not perform well and it was too little too late. They got on the wrong side of the marketing on that one. I think a lot of gamers came for them in a bad way. And I don't know if that was the death knell, but there's another thing going on with the Embracer Group where they were supposed to get like a $2 billion injection of cash. That fell through and now they're liquidating a lot of things. So, and the Volition, I guess, was on the chopping block this time, which is super unfortunate because I do think they made some cool things. The games weren't always bangers, but there was always great ideas in there. So definitely pour one out for Volition. On a slightly more upbeat note, the newest patch for Jedi Survivor has completely reworked its 60 frames per second performance mode on consoles. This story is from Gaming Bolt and posted by Shubhankar Parjiat. So in this story, we've got a pretty good summary about what's coming in the 7th patch of Star Wars Jedi Survivor. It reads, first and foremost, with its newest patch, Star Wars Jedi Survivor has completely reworked its 60 frames per second performance mode on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. Among other things, that entails a new option to disable ray tracing, several GPU and CPU optimizations, and more solid frame rates. Meanwhile, Quality Mode has also made some optimizations that will help reduce frames per second fluctuation and introduce other visual improvements. On PS5, support for virtual refresh rate, VRR, has also been added. So yeah, you can go look at the patch notes. Looks like the cinematics are still going to be in 30 frames per second, but looks like you're going to be able to lock in 60 frames and have more options to kind of optimize the frame rate in that game, which, you know, that game launched pretty rough. So it's cool that they're continuing to support it. That's what you like to see. It's a bummer it takes this long to get things kind of solid and locked in, but you know, this is where we're at with games these days, unfortunately. Here's a good story for a select few fans that I think are out there and are very serious about Bloodlines. Bloodlines 2 resurfaces with a new developer and release window. So the Chinese Room is taking the helm on this long-awaited sequel. This story is from Destructoid with a byline by Eric Van Allen. The first paragraph reads, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 has awoken from its long slumber with a new studio and release window in tow over the weekend. Paradox Interactive confirmed that Bloodlines 2 development is in the hands of the Chinese Room with a release window of fall 2024. Originally, this was being developed by Hardsuit Labs. They had a concept where you're playing as like a new vampire. That's all going to change. It seems like a lot of the ideas are getting scrapped, and now the Chinese Room is taking over. If you're not familiar with the Chinese Room, what they've made, Dear Esther, Amnesia, Machine for Pigs, and Everybody Has Gone to the Rapture. They're working on a new horror game, I believe, but for them to take on this project is really interesting. So I think you could expect something interesting for a Bloodlines 2 game. It's sad that there was a lot of drama and things before with Paradox and with the previous developer, Hardsuit. It's hard to say exactly what would happen. I'm sure somebody eventually could write a book, but yeah, now the Chinese Room is going to develop this. This game's not coming out till 2024. And that seems kind of generous, honestly, but we'll see. Next up, PlayStation's Remote Play handheld finally has a release date. This is the Project Q, which I'm not sure what does this thing have an official name? This is when the PlayStation Portal handheld is expected to be released. I guess it's being called the PlayStation Portal. I didn't even know that. This story is on Game Rant, written by Jeffrey Mazzari. Here's the highlights. Sony's latest handheld device, the PlayStation Portal, is set to release on November 15th, 2023, retailing for $200 US. The PlayStation Portal basically allows users to stream PlayStation 5 games directly to its 8-inch 1080p LCD screen, incorporating the advanced technology of the DualSense controller. Now, remember, this device is it's limited. As far as I understand it, you have to have a PlayStation 5 and on the same wireless network as the PlayStation Portal, as the handheld device. That's how it works. It's meant to be like a second screen if someone else is using the TV or something like that. Or maybe you could be somewhere else in the house. Not a lot of reporting about the range on that thing, but that's essentially what it is. So there you go. That is set to come out on November 15th, and it's $200 if you're interested. I think I'm going to pass on this one, but you guys let me know what you're going to do in the comments. Now, finally, probably the most exciting news over the weekend, PAX weekend and Nintendo Live weekend, was a Nintendo Treehouse Live, which featured the new Super Mario Bros. Wonder. This game looks absolutely fascinating. Just looking through the highlights of this thing, there's so many different things here going on. We saw Toad to get that elephant power up. We've seen the different Wonder Seeds and the flowers that are talking and you're jumping through, and it seems like they've really just pushed things to the next level for this new Mario game, and it's really exciting for me, especially as someone who has kids, to see this really cool, basically 2D Mario game, like a new generation of Mario, and for this to be probably the game that like the Mario game that my kids are probably going to gravitate towards the most, is really, really cool. So I'm super excited for this game. I hope you guys are too. It looks really neat, and I can't wait to play it. And that's out this year on October 20th. So super, super exciting. I'm just going to leave you guys with that one. Super cool. That's a quick run through for the news today. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I can do some more of these. All right, take care. We'll see you on the next one.